Hi everybody, Don Smith for Clark TV 36. We are along Madison Hill Road here in the beautiful township of Clark at the Dr. William Robinson Museum, and we are here back in 1777, we'll say, in that time frame. We've stepped back a couple hundred years, and this is a Hessian encampment in support of the British. Will tell us your roles in that.
Well, they're the Hessians. I'm actually what would be the primary mission of this reconnaissance. I'm here in August to make sure the depths of the estuaries to Raritan and Manhattan and lower New York Harbor, all those estuaries need to be sounded and need to be surveyed to make sure that any of the operations that we're doing, which will almost always include boats, barges, and various watercraft, can be supported effectively without going aground, without becoming a point of interest for the Continentals. If you don't know the rivers, you can't sail up the rivers, thereby you can't get supplies, thereby you're in a lot of trouble. So basically this is a way of securing logistics for the British Army currently residing in New York. And being able to navigate the waterways around the bay is definitely a primary concern for all concerned with keeping food on the table and supplies to Manhattan.
Go ahead. I was going to say, overheard you call them SARDs.
Right, and in support of my mission, I am supported by riflemen of a company of Hessian Jagers, and I'll let the Jagers tell you who they are.
My name's Dan McCarthy, Clark resident. I'm the sergeant in charge of the Jagers here, also U.S. Army retired. And our unit here is von Prushenk's Jager Corps. And this unit and basically all of the Hessians were recruited by His Majesty King George III after such devastating losses that the British suffered in 1775 at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And then, since the British did not have a draft back in England, His Majesty King George III went to his royal relatives in modern-day Germany, because he was from the House of Hanover, and he said, "Can I make a contract to hire out your army in support to suppress this rebellion here in the colonies?" So His Majesty was able successfully, and he made individual treaties with 7 different provinces in modern-day Germany. Our particular unit comes from the province of Hesse-Kassel. Look at a modern map of Germany, you will see the city of Hesse. There were other provinces such as Hessenau, there was Waldeck, there was the Brunswickers, there was Ansbach-Bayreuth. In a total, over the Revolutionary War period, roughly 35,000 Germans were recruited from those states to come here to suppress the rebellion. And that's why we're here. And a term using us as mercenaries is totally inaccurate. We were trained professional army that was just like the modern day military. It said we were given orders by our officers in charge to march, and we did.
So, introduce your other staff.
My other staff here, I have, we like to call Herr Mueller, because we have identified a historical name with Captain Awald was his musician that we have here. This is actually Caleb and his father Scott. He's actually my musician here, and you will see out on the battlefield any other Jaeger units. If you ever see with the hunting horn like that, they're just German Jaegers. The other all-line units you'll ever see through historical reenacting, whether they be other Hessian units or the British, all respond to the fife and drum. And then his father Caleb here is, by the French term, our artificier, and he is responsible for the cooking, the cleaning, setting up the camps, taking care of the wagons. He's our weapons master. If there's something wrong with the weapons, he fixes it. So he's a very diverse gentleman here, and that's why his uniform is different.
So now, in my opening, I mentioned about 1777 or so. Is that about what this encampment would look like back then?
Yes. Yeah. This would be a very limited encampment. This would be more or less a reconnaissance and as much a research to find out. Howe's army needs a lot of resupplying, and one of the reasons why a naval officer might go along with a small group of men to do a reconnaissance would be to find out how navigable the Broadway River is, with the rain being what it was, to know how far we had to go to get boats to get supplies from the foraging in New Jersey to bring them to Manhattan.
I see. And now you're the officer in charge. Am I correct in that?
Well, yes.
Okay.
I'm the reason for the mission. I'm finding out how far the Rahway River can be navigated this late in August, where we're going to put the boat, so what kind of resources we're going to need to load it wherever we can. Obviously, the further upstream we go, the more land we can cover, the more resources we can acquire for the Army in Manhattan. That said, rain does change the level of the river, and that's why my expertise is specifically useful. But I defer to the Wachmeister here, the sergeant, because he knows the terrain better than I do. I'm maybe the mission, but completing the mission really falls upon his shoulders and the shoulders of his riflemen.
Before we get to the stars, let me ask you again about the Rahway River. So that would take you eventually up through Cranford and eventually up towards the Springfield and
Wouldn't it be nice
further.
if it was navigable that far? I doubt. Optimally, yes, that would be our goal. I'd settle for it being enough to get loaded at the nearest landing. That's our point. How large a ship can we get up there?
Right.
Obviously, bigger is better in this regard.
Okay, Sarge, let's talk to you. Tell us about your role in this encampment and the role in 1777.
Well, as part of that time period, it was called the Forage Wars. Once we would get up here by courtesy of the Royal Navy, getting up as far as we could on the Royal River, then they would be barges or flatboats. We would get off flatboats. We would have our map of the area that was done by Royal cartographers, and then we would have our objective mission. And at that time, Rahway was the entire town that it was. Clark did not exist as we know it. And then our mission would be to go out to start just, again, looking for supplies, anything that General Howe and New York City could possibly use, from, even, farm animals, poultry, eggs, hay, forage for the upcoming campaigning season. Because once April really kicks off, then that's the start of the major campaigning season for armies here in North America. So from that, we would get a report that say, oh, at this plantation up here, oh, well, this local patriot leader, he has this, that, he's all the other supplies. So I would take my men, and I'd have my other Jagers, and then I'd have my hornist here, which is my musician. Okay. I would give him the order to fall in, to recall on me, and then we would come up this farm lane here, coming up towards this plantation to see whatever we could find. Following him would be our artificier, which is our wagon master, our mechanic. He also would be working off of the back of the wagon. If all of a sudden we had a problem with weapons, he'd fix weapons. Something wrong with the wagon, he'd fix that. So he was our all-around man for really handling all the stuff. So he'd be handling the wagons. We'd come up here. I'd have the men deploy out. We'd get whatever supplies we could. We'd find out if there were any local patriots in the area. Luckily, we would get here. We'd find out, no, there was no patriot militia under arms, so we wouldn't actually have to fire our weapons. With that, we would gather whatever supplies we'd have. It was common that the British would try to reimburse the locals for their contributions to His Majesty King George III. Then we would round up everything back on our wagons. We would head back down into town, recall all the men. Our hornister would play recall. We'd go back down towards the barges, and then the Royal Navy would take us back down river, all the way back down towards Perth Amboy, where the major ships would be waiting in harbor, and then from there, back over to Staten Island, and then eventually over to Manhattan. Because at that time, New York City, or as the British called it, York City, was really only lower Manhattan, where everything was. And then we would drop off our supplies. I would report to my captain, which was Captain Awald. He was the company commander. I'd give him a report what happened, and they would say, thank you very much, Wachmeister. And then I would put my men into quarters, and they would start working on their uniforms, and then another detachment would get another mission to go out, possibly up towards, say, like Springfield, New Jersey, modern-day Union. And they would go out in all these little parties. Eventually, the Forage Wars would eventually wind up culminating in what is known as the Battle of Bound Brook. And what's affectionately known for the Hessians, for our group, was affectionately known as the Battle of Awald's Hat, because during the battle at Bound Brook, Of course, the train trestle wasn't there and all that. The wind kicked up the one day during the battle, and Ewald's hat went flying off. And then my intrepid men decided to save my hat from those horrible Patriots, save my hat. And they went and got back my hat from the Patriots, handed it back to me. So then by the Hessian journals, it's affectionately known as the Battle of Ewald's Hat.
Excellent. All right, Battle of Ewald's Hat. Very nice. Didn't know that one from the history books. Didn't recognize that one. So now, it being, in August, middle to late summer, would this also be a time that you would be starting to gather supplies for the fall and the winter to stuff that you've seen here, either vegetation or vegetables or whatever, and start stocking those away for the colder months?
Oh, very much so. I mean, it was like we were constantly out on patrols all the time. Again, looking for forage, rounding up stragglers, again intercepting local patriots, because there was a lot of little patriot action in the town during actually the Great Retreat, when Washington was falling back from New York and Fort Washington, Fort Lee. The armies actually crossed right down at the Merchants of Grove Tavern, going down through Rawway and then turning down modern-day Route 27. So we've traced historically our unit was in Rawway by December the 1st. We were in town, so right down the road.
Nice, very nice. Now, would this unit have gotten some help from the Homestead property, the Homestead Farm, not too far from here, where the modern-day Oak Ridge Park is right now?
Actually, it was surprising how many loyal citizens remained passionate about staying English subjects. New Jersey was very much a crossroads of the Revolution, in as much as there were as many soldiers from New Jersey under arms fighting for the king as there were fighting for the rebel cause. This truly was a neighbor against neighbor fight. The demographics in New Jersey were such that there were plenty of people who thought maybe one tyrant in London is a better deal than having 40 tyrants in Philadelphia. The idea of just leaving a well-established government that's protected their families and their property was worth maintaining. The sorting out of the politics could be done later, but there were plenty of people who were very passionately involved in fighting for the crown from the state of New Jersey, from the colony of New Jersey.
Sure. So now with the Battle of Short Hills, which was fought not too far from here, although a lot of folks think it is in modern-day Short Hills in Essex County, it was actually right here where Ashbrook Golf Course is, and coming across there. So would this regiment have been in effect during that time period, and that would have they provided support for that campaign?
Yeah, we were there, exactly. It's listed in all of our documentation, which is on the table behind us, Captain Ewald's diary, and that was one of the big battles for the Battle of Short Hills. I know at the old Ashbrook Golf Course, the old the golf club, the building that was there, that was actually General Benjamin Lincoln's headquarters. Probably most people don't even know that was his actual headquarters. They just go by and they see an old building, and he was a fairly, substantial officer within the Continental Army. And then he was the commanding officer that was responsible at Boundbrook as well. Because everybody says Lincoln in history, they think Abraham. It's like, no, this was another Lincoln. Another Lincoln that fought for the...
Yeah. Sure, yeah, absolutely. And it's just, so many people I just don't think really understand how much of the Revolutionary War, the history, was right here through Union County, right in their neighborhoods, if they live in Clark, or if they live in Westfield, or if they live in, Linden or Winfield Park, along the Rawway, wherever, even in Cranford. It certainly wasn't Cranford at that point. Cranford wasn't until 1879, so we're looking at 100 years later. But, how much of the history that's here in this area, and here at the museum is, living history, and that's exactly what this is, that people should come out and see this. The house dates back to 1690, which, is, I don't know, people I don't know really can fathom that number, 1690 to 2022, even the Homestead property, I'm not quite sure, I don't know if it was 1679, my math could be off, but in the same 300 plus years of history, right in your own backyard. So
most people don't realize it's there. Just like even you go up where town hall is, where Old Brewer School is, and ALJ, and you go by, and that tiny little bridge right past Old Brewer School, but you just see that little river that's there right now. The Patriots, when that was a wooden bridge, they had chopped that all up And that tiny little bridge slowed down an entire British column, and Patriot Militia were just picking them up because they had to rebuild that bridge, because for a soldier with all this equipment to climb down into that ravine, and then you'd have to hand down a weapon, and another guy be on the other side handing up weapons, and then our gentleman with the supply carts movement have to rebuild that bridge. So that slowed that down. So by the time they got to Westfield, the British took their revenge at the old Presbyterian Church.
And the truth of the matter, all these small tributaries, they were a natural defensible position, and all of them would be either fortified or made an entrapment for any large troops moving around trying to get supplies anywhere, and would fall on the soldiers and especially the sailors of the Royal Navy to rebuild block and tackle systems to keep the supplies moving. The bridge had to be rebuilt, everything had to be engineered, and the people who were best at loading and unloading material were obviously sailors and people on the long shore. So all of the shore establishments would be brought as an adjunct to the Army. The military force of the British Army was obviously what gets the most ink in the history books, but all the supporting staff, the Royal Navy was still the premier force that was present with every major movement of any British operation was going to have a contingent of sailors to come with it, if for nothing else, to handle the baggage.
And you mentioned earlier about the ships going in towards Perth Amboy. So would that be where the main focus of your ships would come through, with either Woodbridge or Perth Amboy, Staten Island, what's modern day Staten Island now, and coming up that way through the river, into the Arthur Kill, which is, whether it was named Arthur Kill back then, I don't know. But
it was that's a Dutch name that goes all the way back to when this colony was an environ of New Amsterdam.
Right.
So yes, that Staten Island, Richmond town, was the initial landing point for the British Army coming from Halifax. So it was very well known and very much a logistical hub for the British operations in northern Jersey. Right. Yes, absolutely.
So now, would they also try to make their way up the Raritan River as well? Like with the modern day Driscoll bridges coming up underneath there, and then try and make their way in towards
That was very navigable, probably. Pat will be able to tell you the warships that actually sailed all the way up to the modern day New Brunswick, where Rutgers is.
Right. I mean, again, just because you can bring a ship up there doesn't mean you can bring a ship up there safely. And it's not just navigation that's going to inhibit you. If you're going along the banks and some individual such as Proctor or Henry Knox decides to make it a challenge by putting 9-pounders on the banks, you can bring a ship under fire, and considering the lack of mobility, you could actually just easily lose that ship. During the Philadelphia campaign, a large man of war, the Augusta, ran aground and fell under the guns of Mifflin and Mercer. And again, Henry Knox did an outstanding job by grabbing the guns from Fort Ticonderoga. As much as we like to think that the Americans weren't prepared for this war, there were a lot of forward-thinking gentlemen who saw to it that when they needed, they had plenty of equipment to bring to bear if the circumstances were useful. And of course, one of the reasons why I'm here is to try to gain the information that they already have. This is a bend in the river where the shoals are high, and you could lose a ship very simply by putting it under American Continental artillery. You would want to avoid that whenever possible. So we had to move with a lot of caution whenever we did something like that. You would definitely not bring large ships up here unless you had support on both sides of the river, and you would have to be able to reinforce either side depending on where they went. So you would have a lot of sailors very busy moving boats of men to support the position so they could bring warships and supply ships, and mostly supply ships, up these rivers, load barges, bring them to this point, load ships that can cross New York Bay. There would be a lot of operations that would require a fair amount of skill. It wasn't just thrown together in a heartbeat. It required planning. It was planning, because there were lots of places when someone is trying to upset everything you're doing, it's not just nature you're fighting, it's the ingenuity of desperate men. And that is always a volatile combination.
Absolutely. and I guess also New Jersey with these larger rivers that connect out to the Atlantic Ocean and out to the bay, Raritan Bay, and so forth. I guess that is an advantage. You can try to take that to your advantage. You have the Rahway River, you got the Raritan River, you got the Passaic River, you got the Hackensack River. Trying to work your way up towards North Jersey, and obviously heading further south. You've got the Navesink River. All these rivers that come in and out. So New Jersey isn't as quote landlocked as it really is. It's not. There was plenty of water to get out to the major areas to have those bigger ships come in.
Very good. Exactly. And it's a two-edged sword, because there were plenty of Patriot militia and Patriot sailors who would notice a convoy would come in, and maybe they would anchor too far from supporting ships. And you're talking about a merchant ship with maybe a crew of 30 people. You go out with two fairly sized long boats, all well armed, and you catch them unaware. You could perhaps even steal that ship and sail it to Egg Harbor and offload it as your supplies. There was what you would consider acts of piracy if you wanted to go by the letter of the law. There were plenty of opportunities to make a lot of money too. So it wasn't all hardship for a lot of the Continental Cause people. They took advantage of the idea that there's also some lucrative opportunities that could be converted into both patriotic causes and a little bit of pocket lining too. No one's above sin. So there were, with this kind of chaotic situation, it was a very challenging time for the Royal Navy to make sure that there were plenty of small enough boats to pursue raiders and entrepreneurially minded people who saw, whether it goes to the Continental Congress or not, or half of it just manages to support the good people in Egg Harbor. It's one of those things where the raiding, to have local knowledge and to constantly be doing reconnaissance to see what's changing and what's thriving, the idea of having people constantly going wherever they needed to go to give them information. Fortunately, we have plenty of loyalists who are also helpful in that. Plenty of rivermen from New Jersey were on the side of trade with the United Kingdom. We're on the side, if you look at the politics of the time, the people in Reading who are making ironworks that have to be shipped to England to then be reshipped to Boston as a part of the economic system that was being cultivated to support English economy. The people in Raritan like the idea that their docks are full of material going out to Europe. So us supporting that and them being willing to support our exercises out here to maintain order in the colonies was a big benefit to them. And then again, also being able to interfere with some of that, there's a profit motive to that too. So it's a strange double-edged sword that was wielded for what was the longest war until Vietnam. This was quite a civil war.
Sarge, you got
the most important thing.
Let's come on over this way.
For both the naval officer and for myself would be supplied, hopefully by the Royal Navy, would be a map, a very effective map, and of course, naval officer showing. Oops.
All the estuaries to New York Bay. It's just
knowing
fascinating.
Exactly where to bring the ship and showing the actual route. And if you look on here, up here, you will actually see Newark is on there, and St. George Avenue, Woodbridge is down here. So it actually shows Rahway on here on the map, which was very accurate at the time. And this is a 1777 map. So between having this and your actual reconnaissance, then it would be like, then it's like, oh, well, this has changed names. This town is gone. These people are no longer here. Or then you'll see the difference in the town names from 21st century to then by looking at a map. Back then, today Princeton was Princetown. Clark didn't exist. It was just Rahway. Then it was Woodbridge. But yet Spanktown is listed on this, which was one of the Patriot names for Rahway at the time. So that was actually listed. So
for those watching at home, the modern day towns of Clark, Cranford, Westfield, Linden, they all didn't exist. The only thing really was Woodbridge and Rahway. Am I correct in saying
Yes.
Perth Amboy?
And then after that, and then you'd go down Route 27, then you'd be in a Monmouth County, just like the county didn't exist. It was split between Middlesex County and Essex County. So if you had militia that were here at the time, depending upon if they were patriot or loyalist, they could either belong to Essex County militia or Middlesex County militia. And then you didn't know also, were they patriot militia? Were they loyalist militia? And then you had instances where you had militia groups that went out, and of course militia did not have assigned uniforms. It was whatever that farmer they had. Sometimes they didn't even have proper muskets. Maybe they would just have sickles and scythes, and then they would go out on this mission, and then they would run into each other on like some kind of patrol, and they're like, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Woodbridge, like that. And then all of a sudden finding out, oh, that one happens to be loyalist, this patriot when they talk politics, and the next minute they're shooting at one another. But that was typical of that. Really was the country's really first civil war. Right. Totally divided. I mean, even of all the top intellectuals at the time always stated that the revolution, there was a third for independence, a third were against, and the third were neutral.
Okay. Let's talk about the encampment here that we have. First, maybe while Phil is on us here, maybe just talk to everyone about the actual dress that you're in, the hat, the clothing, kind of walk us through what you have on.
The basic uniform at the time, by 1777, I'm still wearing, managed to maintain my riding boots, which a lot of the Hessians still had when they first came over here. A year into the campaign, a lot of the original pants we came over here were all green that matched this. We still have our, as we see on my Hornister here, he still has most of his full kit. But by this time, he had already lost his original green pants because they had been chewed up in the campaigns of 1776. So we were guaranteed through our contract with our Landgrave and through the British to get a resupply once a year from the province of Hesse Castle. If certain supplies didn't come in, then we would draw from British stores. So at this point, we've already got replacement pants because our greens are long gone. The Hessians and particularly the Jagers took extreme pride in taking care of their weapons, holding on to their regimental coats and their waistcoats. By the end of the war, that was sometimes all they had left. Sometimes they were barefoot by the end of the war.
So talk us through your Hornist here as far as the horn and the entire uniform.
Will tell us a few things about the horn and part of your job.
Well, this is a Parforce horn. The Parforce horn was originally created by the French, which was just the same design, but it was just all solid brass, and not the tuning slide here didn't exist with the French version. And the Germans took the same exact idea and put that on it, and with a mouthpiece that is able to be taken off. And the Germans used it for the same purpose as the French did, and as everyone else in majority of Europe for hunting trips and of the like. So
modern day, what would this be the equivalent of? Kind of almost a trumpet to a degree, trombone. Does it have that kind of sound?
It has more of the sound of a French horn, but serves more of the purpose as a radio.
Okay. So could you give us a little, play a few notes here? Nice, very nice. It's a very call to action kind of sound, from everyone coming in from wherever.
He plays just about everything that's within the regulation of songs of the time, and Caleb has learned, play all those of retreat, fall in, call to arms, mess call, and it's just a matter of we try to hopefully coordinate with other German reenacted Jaeger units. So if all of a sudden say we're doing the Battle of Monmouth and we're at one end of the field and their Hornisters on the other end, and they'll blow the horn, and then we go, oh, they want us to move that way, because that's how they knew, because the Patriots and the British all responded to the fife and drum. Mm-hmm. This was our musical instrument. This is how we responded to it.
That's right. Let's talk about your other member of your crew here. Why don't you have him come on in and describe his dress, his uniform here.
Yeah, so my name's Scott Silver, and I'm an artisan. So as it has been mentioned, I would be assisting, tending to the camp, things in the camp, whether it was getting meals prepped, getting the camp ready to go on a train. I might be taking field personnel's personal equipment and tending to it. Maybe a lock has broken, or maybe a trigger set needs to be reforged, or something has been damaged. I would be tending to that. My uniform is slightly different. I'm not in the traditional Hessian green. Historically, at the time, I would have been most likely of Jewish descent, and I would have come over on the ship with the Royal Navy, contracted by the Jagers to tend to those camp needs. While here in colonial side, I would probably get assistance from loyalists, people that were sympathetic. We might go onto a farm and they might be sympathetic to where the family, the children might come out and help and wash clothes and tend with me as I'm working on the camp. But eventually there would be a day that my sergeant comes to me and says, "I will see you here in 3 days." Understood? I'll see you there.
You've got your orders, exactly. Can you talk to us about some of the weapons that you have here on display as well? Maybe kind of walk us through. I don't know who.
They're kind of standard. You see Caleb's weapon here. They're all various different calibers because these were personal weapons we purchased in the province of Hesse Castle. So it wasn't like a military issue. So it was kind of what they wanted. The stocks are a little bit different. Yours is 54 caliber?
Yes, sir.
Correct. So, and they're all different calibers, and they're also different lengths.
So how long would it take to reload one of these?
For a combat, we were told as Jaegers we would actually to try to fire good aim shots 1 round a minute. Firing twice a minute was very good. If we were to get into a big combat zone, and if it went to 3 rounds, then a lot of times what the soldiers would do, they would stop using their issued ammunition that was like whatever the caliber was. They put smaller caliber rounds down the barrel to load faster. My particular one right here, this happens to be a 50 caliber ball, and you can see has a tiger maple wood.
If you were to put a smaller ball, wouldn't you lose your accuracy?
However, that is exactly the thing. But at that point in combat, sometimes the orders were just to lay down as much fire as possible. But the purpose of that, we would try to get away from that. Again, riflemen were used as elite troops to try to carefully aim shots. Right. Primary targets maybe would be to shoot an officer, or the big thing was also to take out Patriot artillery. You could take out Patriot artillery before they got within range of you. You were a huge asset to the British cause. Artillery was very big. Now, probably next to disease, probably getting hit by artillery fire was probably the next biggest cause of death. Other different weapons here. I also have a shorter barreled Jager rifle. This is almost more to the length of a carbine, right here. And this happens to be 62 caliber. As a senior NCO, this would have been my personal preferred weapon because 9 times out of 10, I probably, here, hold this for a minute. If I have the sling on it, then in combat, I will have this over my shoulder like this out on the field, because if I'm running all of my men, I have my command stick on the field, which sometimes I will have a whistle, and when they blow the whistle, I'll put up my command stick. That's the sign to rally around me, or I'll be going down in combat where all of a sudden all the shooting is going on. They can't hear anything, but if all of a sudden I go like this, tap him on the shoulder, he's going to look up, and I say point over there, he's going to go where I'm pointing. So I would go around in the field. Once my personal safety was that, I would probably drop that and I would take my rifle off my shoulder. But the secret of a good NCO in the field is my weapon is not this weapon. My weapon is my men. If I keep my men alive, they're going to keep me alive. So my job is to look out for them first.
Great, wonderful. So let's talk about the actual encampment itself here now. When as this was set up, I guess you're more the quartermaster maybe for this particular outfit. Talk to us about the tent, how things will be set up, and
Yes.
you know.
So this is a typical A-frame or wedge tent, as we call them. The wedge tents would come in a couple different sizes. They might be just, depending on who actually seamed it, there might be a few inches difference. Typically, we would 6 to 8 men would sleep in this tent at the night. So
6 to 8 men in this one tent. Wow.
yes. So if you were the guy sleeping in the back, sleeping this way in the tent, you had to crawl over everybody to, if you need to get out during the night. The flip side to that, if you were the guy sleeping at the front, you had everybody climbing out over you all a night long. So, but this is, they would sleep 6 to 8 men in a wedge tent.
What normally would the tent be made of?
Canvas. Yes. Yep.
And that would be for summer, fall, all seasons, or would they go ahead and reinforce it coming up for the winter?
That would be all seasons. However, they do need maintenance. They would actually be where we actually use like a wet sealer in 21st century. They would actually use different ground seed oils and stuff to actually seal them from being to be waterproof, but they were for year-round quarters.
Also, one of the reasons why this entire war was being fought in the wintertime, as much as the tents might offer some warmth to the soldiers, often enough they would come to someone's house and say, your barn looks very comfortable and you can take the payment that we're going to pay rent for you, happily or unhappily, doesn't really matter to us, but we are going to be quartering people at your residence. And that would be in a reconnaissance mode as we are now. This might be where we secure our equipment. The men will sleep in whatever outbuildings are available to them, and as an officer I would bring some of my well-earned coin and pay for a nicer place to stay. And I'm not talking an inn, a plantation such as this. Someone sleeping in your kitchen because it's me. And you wouldn't be given, you'd be compensated, but you wouldn't be given much choice. Hence, one of the things in our Constitution was no quartering of troops during peacetime in private homes. It was commonplace in very inclement weather, to say people go inside. They sit by fires, they stay warm, and they work their gear there. And as inconvenient as that might be to a citizen, that was also considered one of the responsibilities of a citizen of the British Empire.
So now, as far as like the cooking and so forth, would that be done out here? Would that be done in a house like the Robinson house? I mean, where would that be? Would you just set up outside the tent, or would there be a separate area that all the men would go ahead and sit and eat together?
Typically, if it was nicer weather and we had not paid rentage for somebody's place, and we were on the march, so to speak, a lot of our cooking would be done in groups. Not everybody would have their own fire pit, so you might have several tents worth of men that are cooking around one fire. In that scenario also, we didn't have like a lot of cast iron with us, because cast iron is heavy. You've got to pick it up and you got to lug it. So a lot of our cooking ability was based on finding wood that had a natural split in. Then we put a stick across the top if we wanted to hang something. We might have a little kettle with us, with a iron hook that we can hang on it, but we wouldn't be lugging around the big braziers and lugging around big heavy cast iron things, unless we were really settling down for a winter encampment, or we knew that we were going to be at a location for an extended period of time. Then our train, we might put that on the train.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I watched this program called The Taste of History. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that, with Walter Staub, and it's about Revolutionary War in this time period, about cooking and how how everything was put together, and it really makes some amazing dishes, like you said. With he's using more cast iron things because he was actually in an actual kitchen, but a field kitchen, like you said, needs to be mobile, almost like a mash unit. Like, you need to be able to just store it, because who's going to carry that on your back, or have other individuals carry that?
Right. And when I say train, I don't mean a thing running on a set of tracks. I'm talking about a train of wagons. Sure. And so in that wagon train, I would also have like chickens. So I'd have my eggs, if I couldn't get eggs from a farmer or something locally. So, that train's going to include probably livestock as well. I might have one cow that I'm getting milk from. So depending on what unit I'm attached with, am I just somebody attached to somebody that goes out and does reconnaissance, or am I attached out to where I'm, serving the senior officer as to what resources I have readily available?
other thing that happens too, and this was very common in combat. Guys would be fighting, and then all of a sudden you'd be getting this, and all of a sudden it'd click, you get click, click, click. Even in good weather, sometimes just enough of the flint is not striking the pan, you will not get that spark that goes down into the pan to ignite the powder charge. So it was very common all of a sudden to be in real battle, and bullets are flying over your head, and all of a sudden, soldiers just like here, I'm giving him my wrench to go over here in combat,
You know,
and all
let's,
to change out.
Let's just get this for Phil here on camera so we can start it. Okay. So, all right, tell us what's going on here. We're ready to fire one of your weapons.
Well, it's he's have a problem. The flint is not striking, so I gave him my wrench. So what he's doing in for a combat situation or just for firing demo, he's changing the flint that goes within the jaws of the hammer, because sometimes it'll just it won't that spark is just not right and it doesn't deliver that spark into the pan. The powder charge will not go off. So a lot of things to do is you unscrew everything with the screw. He changes out the flint, which he keeps extra flints in the buttstock of the weapon. Then he'll put a fresh flint in there, close it up by hand, tighten it up with the wrench. Then he'll put the wrench away or give it back to me. Because sometimes not every soldier will carry a wrench. That's why I go around constantly on the field checking to see if their weapons are going off. Then he tightens it up, sees if it seats properly. He's checking the powder in the pan. Then he'll close it, hands me back that, and then he'll try to fire it off to see if I actually get a discharge.
I apologize.
That's great. Honestly, it's good to have us.
You would think the battle of Fort Hills, which is held here at Oak Ridge. not that I'm aware of.
Hold it like there. The leather.
There are some places that are very specific that they
Okay. He'll try to get it finger tight by using this to set it, and then the key is just to turn that using the wrench to tighten up the flint, and then hopefully take your time. That's good. Okay. Just make sure to try to put the extra powder back down into the pan, and then he'll close the frizzen cover. I'll give it a shot. There you go. You can see sometimes it's just that little thing, that little tweak. If all of a sudden it's just, it's just that tool, it's just, that flint going down just doesn't, if it doesn't strike that plate just the right angle, is not going to get that spark. So sometimes you just have to play with it. Like sometimes if guys are not changing it out actually in combat or in simulated skirmishes, sometimes it's just a matter you pull it back, you'll take out the tool, you can see where it's already angled, and you just kind of re-angle it so it's a proper strike, and then tighten it back down.
Imagine how many men were probably killed because they couldn't, you just couldn't get that to fire or whatever. I mean, how many mishaps,
Oh, that was common. That was particularly with the Jagers. And that's why you always wanted another rifleman who was loaded all the time. So if all of a sudden his weapon would not go off, because you could have, I'd be the one loaded behind him, or then if all of a sudden say they were Patriot Militia where the Crown Colors flag was, and all of a sudden they start rushing. The only thing we can do at that point is to either fall back or you do this. I'd give the order to charge back at them this way. We would draw swords and we would charge at them, which can be, or use the weapon as a club, because even being charged with a sword still is very intimidating. And this was used by the Jagers, and it is documented at the Battle of Brandywine, which is in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, of September 1777. At one point, the Jagers were given the order to charge the Patriot lines over where the American riflemen were, and the orders were half Jagers, draw swords, and then the other half with rifles. So basically get your rifle going there, make it look like we're charging. So the order was given like that, and it'd be advance, and we were like, charge. All these Jaegers going like this, half with sword here in front, and then we would go right into the militia like, halt. And they would just drove them right off the field. They did not even fire a shot when they saw us coming.
Yeah. Now, as far as the formation is concerned, what was the kind of typical formation for you? You know, with the British, they all kind of just lined up like that and kind of just moved forward, whereas the Patriots, you know, were kind of just all about behind trees and whatever, and that made things also difficult for them.
We also did similar tactics. We would use the trees. Like for instance, like he's moving over here, he's going to move over there, like that. So say he'd be right there, I'd be out in the open, you know, right here. But a lot of times if I was out in the open, then I'd be doing this, and I'd give the order, Neely, which is German for kneel. Then you'd have other guys coming up. I'd have guys on the tree line over there by that tree. And then once the guys were up there and cover, then I would give him the order, poets. And then say he would move up to that fence line. Right. The next guy over there would be moving up to that tree over there. Once they were in position, then I would get up, move forward, and then we'd reconnoiter, say, all the way up to the fence. If there was nobody there, then I would turn the men's in a wheelie maneuver going down the road. Once we got down to the road, all of a sudden, boom, we could see down the road, at the bend of the road, Patriot militia coming at us. From that point, having riflemen staged right there on the road could start picking off Patriots down at the bend of the road very effectively with these weapons, because these weapons are effective at 300 yards.
Full show, Phil.
Yeah.
Full show. All right, I'll...
Hey, Caleb? Yeah. Is your music in there or in there? Are you? Nice deal.
Ready, Phil?
Yeah.
Es ist klar, jawohl.
Klar. Zurück.
Okay, we're gonna flash forward here to 2022. How did you get involved in the reenactment work?
Well, I'm a historian by academia. I went to Montclair State University. I have a major in history and modern archaeology. Again, also a retired soldier, so I was always a history guy. So I actually just took some friends to local reenactments, and then we actually went down to Trenton the one time the Battle of Trenton was going on, and then I ran into my good friend Pat, who was running the Jaegers at that time with our old commanding officer, Kevin. And my friend Bruce, who couldn't be here, was actually one of the few German Americans in this unit, joined the unit at the time, and then we started going, checking out as spectators, and then Kevin approached me and said, hey, you come a lot, would you like to join? And that was during the last big reenacting period, during the 225th. So I joined during that period, came aboard. And that's how, and then originally it was just Kevin said, you know, if you'd like to try it, and then after that it stuck, and then I finished my time and, you know, retired at the Army National Guard, so now I wear this uniform.
Wonderful. Pat, how about yourself? How did you get involved in all this?
I inherited it from my father in some ways. My father was chief of police where I grew up in Robbinsville, and we, during the bicentennial, of course, had our colonial days like a lot of municipalities had during the bicentennial, and my father, being an avid historian himself, was selected by our township to try to give some demonstrations. So he had a few friends who were doing what was at the time a colonial militia unit, the Egg Harbor Guard, which was the 3rd Gloucester County militia. Gloucester County at that time went across where Ocean County is now, because there was no Ocean County in the 18th century. That stuck with him, and then I followed as his son. I was 12 at the time of the bicentennial. So we started as naval militia, and then just because of stagecraft as much as anything else, became Royal Navy. And of course, like any large club, the jamboree environment drew us to the Jagers because we had friends in that camp. And being a father and son team, taking advantage of a very family-oriented activity. I loved camping, he loved camping, we loved history. We just became more and more involved in reenacting, and eventually I gravitated to becoming one of the administrative people for the Jagers, because I had the time and the skills in the 20th and 21st century to do it. And that put us in reenacting. My late father would still be here if he could be, but in some ways he still is.
Yeah, wonderful. Caleb, how about you guys? How did you guys get started?
Well,
You
you can tell it. I'm not much of a
Okay.
storyteller.
All right. So Pat and I, our sons were in Cub Scouts together, and they were in the same den, and I ended up becoming the Cub Master. Pat was one of my den leaders. So over that time of our sons being in Cub Scouts, we had obviously formed a friendship. And one evening, my wife and I, my family, we had bought a house, and we had the Updikes up for supper one night. And just because I had met some of the gentlemen in the unit, because Pat would graciously reach out to the unit anytime we had to do a scout history requirement, and they would come in and just asking how some of the guys and stuff. And Pat goes, "I really need a hornist." And I looked at him, I was like, "Pat, you do realize Caleb's a 3rd-year trumpeter, right? And he plays jazz band." And so the following weekend, we found Caleb uniformed out and meeting the other musicians of the unit and just seeing, hey, is Caleb a match? And a month and a half later, we found our whole family kitted out at the Battle of Trenton.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful, great. It's cool. Wonderful to hear the behind-the-scenes stories of how you all got involved. All right, so gentlemen, the uniforms and whatnot, this is fairly expensive stuff. I mean, are you funded by anybody? Is this all self-funded by you and your group for an interest group, or you pay for this out of pocket? How do you work?
It's usually out of pocket on our own. I have seen other hobbies that are more expensive, but I would define this as an expensive hobby. There are various sources. There are some, what we call in the hobby, sutlers that provide some of the equipment, but a lot of it is just artisan craft that we've developed. There are a lot of fine people. I know one of them makes better shoes than I've ever worn in 21st century wear. You do find people who make these things, and again, it's not cheap, but it is all self-funded, although we'll be happy to pass the hat if you're comfortable with it. But the truth is, on a certain level, it sounds expensive, but when you think of what you would spend if you were just camping out, if you think of all the different things we do, no hobby is cheap.
Right.
And everybody has a little crazy that they spend their money on. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have access to the best sailing boat ever, and it's a sailing boat that's wonderful because it's my brother-in-law's, and he pays for it. So he's got an expensive hobby too. So the truth of the matter is, this is a hobby I always recommend to my friends, because once you've spent a certain amount on the gear, then it's just maintenance, and then it becomes a library's worth of talking and learning and exploring and researching, which actually doesn't take that much money. And then you get to meet all kinds of very nice people. We've had a great time in Clark. We've had a lot of very interested people, and the kids have been absolutely wonderful. Somebody's doing a good job around here because the kids are involved and they ask good questions, and they're very curious. It's a great way to spend a weekend. It really is.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd have to agree basically with Pat said, that everything pretty much is out of pocket, unless somebody is lucky enough to get out of the hobby and say we get a donation to the unit, somebody's turning in old regimental coats or waistcoats, and then all of a sudden, boom, Caleb gets involved. Whoa, we just happen to have part of your uniform ready to go. Try it on, see if it fits. And then we go down and then we actually have our unit roster, and then like the actual funding, the way everything works for our unit, and for like doing and how we raise funds, and stuff goes into a collective kitty and like that. And then if we have money to okay, well, we have some new guys, well, let's see if we can acquire some more neck stocks or maybe an extra pair of boots for somebody else who wants to come in.
Now, are these the vests and their shirts and pants and things like that, are they handmade, or is it just there's a whole group that makes these? Or?
Yes, no, they're handmade, and there's a plethora of different vendors that are out there that supply. One might just do specialize in shirts, and particularly the heavy Jager stuff. These are all sometimes individually made. We have one or two particular vendors, and people do the sewing that do the jackets. And then one of the things similar, like when I got promoted, then I had to actually change the piping that's on my regimental jacket that I have hanging up on the thing, because it was silver, and then it was gold as an NCO. So just little additions like that over time. But overall, I mean, it is expensive, but the most expensive thing that a soldier will bring to usually is the weapon. The weapons are the most expensive, and then your personal sword, is a little less expensive. Those are the most expensive. But as we always try and we get people involved, that's why we're lucky enough that we have some extra. Sometimes we have extra weapons. So if somebody new wants to get involved and they want to get a flavor, the taste of it, we can actually loan out a uniform, a hat. We can equip, say an 18, 19-year-old kid who wants to play for the first time, and you'll get a loaned out Brown Bess carbine or something like that, and they get the flavor. And then 9 times out of 10, usually once somebody comes out like that, a lot of times they'll get the bite and they say, this is a lot of fun. Yeah. And then after that, then it's like, and then we have our own regs. Okay, well, as long as you're joining this, you have a job, or your parents are helping you. You have to make sure to put a few dollars down every year to buy your kit.
Right, to keep up with the maintenance of it.
Yeah, and then that's.
Things that come along. Do you guys have put it in the 21st century? You have a website where people can get in touch with you if they wanted to make a donation, or how would they do that?
Well, I'm going to defer that question to our logistical specialist, but we do have a couple of Facebook pages where you can get to know us, and then you can ask those questions, and they will be addressed by our internet guru. If you want to have a good meme to attach to how do you become this, one of our favorite memes on the websites that we frequent shows a little boy asking his mom, saying, "When I grow up, I want to be a reenactor." And she says, "Oh, sweetie, you can't be both. You can either grow up or you can be a reenactor." But he'll give you. We're working on a new website, and we have a couple of Facebook pages which we are trying to foster more membership on, and he'll be able to give you the information on that.
Great.
Yeah. So our Facebook page is Von Prushank Field Jaegers. Facebook will resolve that, as well as our web page that we're in the process of building, which you can go to. We do have our fall campaign schedule on there for the most part, as well as some links to our Facebook page is hessianjager.org, and that's HESSIANJAEGER.org.
We'll put a picture up with this at the end of the piece here is their business card, and
that's my email address. So
and that's Pat's email there.
Questions, you can send it
Excellent.
to me, and I can forward it to
Very, very good. Very good.
We will and as much as we would love you to join our unit, if for whatever reason you're wanting to do colonial militia, or you want to do Coldstream Guards, or whatever your historic bent is, we can redirect people to that. I'll be happy to give you if you contact me, I'll give you contact people for various and other organizations that do reenactments as well. We're like I said, I think we're a very good unit to join, because we do offer some logistical support to people coming into the hobby. but other units also offer similar circumstances. And again, it's a growing hobby. Please get into it before the 250th, because then everybody will be waiting in line and there won't be so much loaner equipment available. So it's an opportunity now.
Great. All right, gentlemen, appreciate your time here today. Great job here. And, for those living in the Clark area, certainly come out to the William Robinson home here and take a tour of the museum, because it really is just a living piece of history, going back to 1690. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Any final thoughts, sir?
Stay loyal.
All right. I think that says it all.